Writer's Read by LiTracey. Getting that book in children's hands.
Hi, I'm Tracey Grice and welcome to the Writer's Read podcast. One of the quotes that inspires me in my practice as a teacher, in fact it's the one that sits front and centre of my desk at school, is written by Nancy Atwell, an internationally acclaimed author, and she says that for students of every ability and background, it's the simple, miraculous act of reading a good book that turns them into readers. Because even for the least experienced, most reluctant reader, it's the one good book that changes everything. The job of adults who care about reading is to move heaven and earth to put that book into a child's hands. And that's why this podcast exists. On the Writer's Read podcast today, I'm talking to award-winning and best-selling author of young adult and middle grade fiction, Fleur Ferris. As our reader in residence, Fleur will be sharing her reading life with us and reading from her latest book, Found. Also on each Writer's Read podcast, we have our Rebecca Recommends segment with children's literature expert Rebecca Bird. Rebecca will be sharing her insights on other titles written by Fleur. Now we're hearing from Fleur Ferris, and for the Writer's Read podcast, this is our first foray into young adult literature. I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting up with Fleur when she was here for some publicity events in Adelaide. Aside from being an award-winning author, Fleur has a background working in police and ambulance services in Victoria and South Australia. Her debut novel, Risk, won numerous awards, was published internationally, became an Australian top 10 bestseller, and has been adapted to stage. Fleur's second book, Black, was Australia's best-selling YA new release of 2016 and has been optioned for film. However, it's her latest action thriller, Found, that we will be hearing her read from today.
Okay, so I'm reading from Found, and my character Beth is been taken by her mother away from the town, and they've gone out and she doesn't know what's going on. They haven't gone home, they've gone to a channel area and there's a white van following them. Beth doesn't know anything about the van, only that perhaps whoever's driving it has their father in the car, and she knows that her mother is scared of whoever's driving it. As we trudge towards the Young's place, my body thrums with adrenaline and fear. Questions flood my mind, but for now I must focus on reaching the safe place, wherever that is. If we follow this main channel, we'll eventually reach your own property, but surely we're not going to walk all the way. Maybe the safe place is somewhere on the Young's farm. Maybe it's their place. They're away on holiday at the moment, but they wouldn't mind us going inside and using their phone in an emergency. Mum stops. We've reached a section of channel with no kumbungi weeds. Beth, we're going to have to move faster for this next part. If they come back along the road, they can see right down the length of the channel, and we don't have any cover. It's about 1k. I swallow. I'm not sure I can go any faster. My feet are already numb and they'll sink into the mud even more where there are no roots to hold us up. You okay? Mum says. I nod, but no, I'm not okay. I'm standing in freezing mud while God knows who is hunting us. Mum steps out of the water onto the dry section of channel, careful not to leave footprints. She lies flat against the bank of the channel and crawls up on her elbows. She peers over, then scrambles back down. The road's clear, let's go, she says. She starts running, and I follow. It's slow and awkward. My shoe is sucked off my foot and disappears as mud folds over the top of it. I stop. Mum looks back. My shoe! Leave it! I do as she says. Her hand moves to her hip where her gun is and rests there for a moment. She stumbles, goes down on one knee, then she's up and running again. Our pace is slow and cumbersome, only just faster than a walk. I stumble too and my hands hit the mud. I recover, push myself back up and stay close to Mum. My heart thuds in my chest from the work of the run. 100 metres. My legs are heavy, my thighs burn. I'm fit, but this is hard work. I concentrate on my breathing, my posture, and I pump my arms, trying to find a better rhythm. I breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth. The mud sucks at my feet with every step, and I realise there is less resistance on my foot with no shoe. I stomped down hard with my right foot and let the mud take my other shoe. I'm past caring about the slime, the stink, the leeches. My concern is reaching the bridge before that van comes back. I notice Mum's hand keeps moving to her holster at her side, checking her gun is still there. She's breathing hard, arms pumping, focused. 200 metres, 300 metres, 400, almost halfway. Mum stops. Shh. I freeze and hold my breath. Hear that? She whispers. I do. A car engine. Mum scrambles up the channel's bank, takes one look and flies back down. She doesn't have to say anything because the colour is drained from her face. They're coming. So they're basically trapped in a channel that runs where the people who are looking for them can see, and there's nothing and nowhere to go. The setting is a rice field, so there's nowhere to hide. There are no trees, and they're after them. So Beth doesn't know what's happening yet, and she's about to find out that her life isn't what she thought it was, and that her parents aren't who she thinks they are, and even her house and her farm isn't what she thought.
Well, listeners, you know what you need to do if you want to find out what happens to Beth.
Rebecca recommends.
Can I just say that Fleur Ferris is just what we need in YA Australian fiction. I love the emotionally charged, deep and meaningful YA as much as the next person. But every now and then, I just want something to read that takes me on a roller coaster of a thrill ride. And that is what reading a Fleur Ferris novel is to me. In saying that, of the two books I'm going to talk about, the first one is not really an action-packed thriller. It is more of a menacing and tragic story, but a must-read for all teens. So the first book is Risk, and it is a not-so-nice glimpse into the world of online chat rooms. Now, this book first came out in 2015, and while I'm sure that at the time we were aware of the dangers of chatting with strangers online, I think that the issue of online safety is one that all children and teens are well aware of today. In this book, we have two friends, Taylor and Sierra. They've been best friends their whole lives, as their mums are best friends. Taylor has always felt that she plays a bit of second fiddle next to the gorgeous, well-travelled and confident Sierra. Sierra, who has no trouble going after what she wants, even if it means hurting her friends. So when they start chatting to a boy online, Taylor is super excited when later that night he emails her, not Sierra. They exchange photos and they get to know each other over the course of a weekend, and Taylor is so excited because Jacob Jones is super cute and he seems to really like her. Now at school on Monday, Taylor's bubble is burst as Sierra comes to school with the news that she has been chatting to Jacob Jones online, and they have so much in common, and she is going to meet him on Friday night. Taylor doesn't say anything to Sierra about her and Jacob, even though she is hurt and angry and disappointed. This alone gives us some sort of insight into what their friendship is like. Now, meeting someone you have chatted to online is not the smartest idea. But Sierra assures her friends that she will be fine. She's meeting him at the local shopping centre, after school, in broad daylight. It'll be perfectly safe. So when Sierra calls Taylor late on Friday, saying that she's met Jacob, he's older but amazing and she's going to spend the night with him, Taylor tells her that it's a bad idea and that she won't cover for her. But Sierra, being Sierra, doesn't listen, and she does it anyway. When Sierra doesn't come back on Saturday morning, Taylor's a bit worried. But it's not like Sierra hasn't done this before. She'll turn up when she's ready. But when Sierra doesn't turn up by Sunday, she's really worried, and she realises that she will need to tell her mum and Sierra's mum where Sierra went. Sierra is missing, and the last person to see her is Jacob Jones, a person we soon find out doesn't actually exist. Now, the obvious main element of the story is about online safety, and we often get this picture in our heads that the online predator is some older, dodgy-looking character that you would never approach in real life. But what if the online predator was a cute, young and charming guy, absolutely the kind of person you would approach in real life? What do you do then? The book is also about doing the right thing, but more than that, it's about figuring out what the right thing is, because it's not always clear what that is. The other Fleur Ferris book that I want to talk about is called Wreck, and here's what the blurb has to say. Tamara Bennett is going to be the first journalist to strictly report only good news. Finished with high school, Tamara is ready to say goodbye to her sleepy little town and part-time job at the local paper. O Week awaits, which means parties, cute boys and settling into the student res with her best friend Rel. Things take an unexpected turn, however, when she arrives home to find her house ransacked and her life in danger. What is this mysterious note, and why does it mean so much to one of Australia's most powerful media moguls? Caught between a bitter rivalry and a dangerous family secret, who can Tamara trust? Or should she trust herself? Now, this is a fast-paced thriller told from two perspectives. Tamara in present day, and then there's William's story from 5 years ago, where the story really starts. It is a book that starts as it means to go on, with fast-paced action. Tamara comes home to a ransacked house only to have a gun put to her head. If this isn't bad enough, another man appears, fights off the guy with the gun, but wraps Tamara up in a doona, throws her into the backseat of his car and drives her into the bush, where Tamara is sure she'll be murdered. It turns out that this is actually the good guy and he is actually trying to save her life. But is he really? And so begins the twisty and turny mystery that slowly unfolds and gets more twisty and turny as we read. And all of this goes back to a note found in a bottle, a note that says, "I survived." 5 years ago, William and his super-rich media mogul family, the Chisels, were involved in a devastating boating accident where during a violent storm their boat capsized. There were 8 people on the boat and only 7 people made it to safety. William's brother Christian was never found. After weeks of searching, Christian was presumed dead, but then the note in the bottle turns up, which brings with it a whole lot of danger and mystery. The person who saved, or kidnapped, depends on how you look at it, Tamara from her house is Zell, and he's connected to the family in some way. And he is sure that Christian survived, and that the other brother, Knox, had something to do with him never being found. It turns out that there have been other bottles with other notes that have turned up over the years, and the people that have found those bottles have all met untimely ends. Zell is determined to not let this happen to Tamara, whatever it takes. Tamara is conflicted. Who can she trust? Is the guy that kidnapped her really trying to save her life? Shootouts, intense police interrogations, unplanned helicopter flying, and lots of running. All of this makes for a fast-paced, action-packed rollercoaster ride of a read. I think I have said fast-paced at least 4 times now, but really that's the perfect way to describe this must-read thriller.
Hi, I'm Fleur Ferris and you're listening to the Writers Read podcast.
As always on the Writers Read podcast, we get to hear about the reading life of our featured author. I hope you enjoy listening to my chat with Fleur. So Fleur, welcome to Adelaide and thanks for meeting with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. This podcast is all about writers reading, really. So we've heard from you read your book, but now we're going to switch focus to not so much talk about your writing life as your reading life. And the purpose being that, you know, for our listeners, they're learning from adult readers around them to help them to build their own reading identity. Mm-hmm. So when you think about your earliest memories of books and reading, would you say that that's something that's always been a part of your life, or is it something that's sort of come into your life at a later age?
No, it was always a part of my life. So picture storybooks. One of my favourites is The Hungry Caterpillar. That's still a favourite of today. Uh-huh. I think that was actually published the year I was born.
Okay.
So there are books. As far as I could remember, I always was a reader. I then graduated into novels like The Magic Faraway Tree, Enid Blyton, and enjoyed the chapter books. So it was always sort of the action-adventure style stories that I really enjoyed.
Would you say, obviously, then books have been a part of your life sort of from your earliest memories. Would you say there's a book that changed your life? Through my adult time, definitely. Through my younger years, I guess there was books. There's not one particular book that I can say, yes, that was the book. Mm-hmm. But my reading was so broad as a child, and that was because of what we read at school as well as what I was reading at home. Mm-hmm. But the one consistent thing was thrillers in my house. So even as a child, I was reading adult thrillers because that's what my mum read. Mm-hmm. That was what was available to me. So I would read all my stories that I had to for school, but my pleasure reading was all thrillers. And
So I guess that has changed my life because that's what I love. I love watching thriller movies, and now I'm writing thrillers, wanting to achieve the same thing that I received from those books, and that is just, up to 8 hours of pleasure where you're just engrossed in that one story. And I lived out on a farm, and that was my entertainment. So in that way, yes, it changed my life. Since then, many books have changed how I think and how I feel about things. So, yeah.
So you talk about, sort of the reading that you did at school and then the reading that you did for pleasure at home. So when you think about yourself as a reader now, like how is reading part of your life? And I ask that because sometimes students see reading as schoolwork. This is something we do at school. And, a great majority will find reading for pleasure at home, weekends, holidays. But some do see it as schoolwork. But we see reading manifest itself in so many ways as adults. What's reading like for you as an adult? What does it bring, to your life?
Well, it still brings great pleasure. I live on a rice farm, which is where the latest book that I've got coming out is set, and that's 75 k's from town. So I have audiobooks in that time, but while I'm at home, I've got books on the go all the time. So I read because I'm a writer, so I read within the genre that I'm writing in, which is the young adult category of all genres in that category. But I also read adult thrillers too. One day I might write an adult book, but it's just I'm reading for pleasure all the time in that way. I also get asked to blurb for books, so I might be reading a book that might fit beside mine. So I'll be reading that book, books that haven't come out yet. And then I do like to read outside of my genre because it just broadens your mind. And I find great pleasure in that as well. So all of my reading is for entertainment as an adult. And even as a child, there was only like 3 books that I didn't like through school.
Wow. That
I just thought, this is just too hard work. But, you'd still read them. But yeah, mostly it's all reading for pleasure.
So it's interesting for me to hear that you the thriller genre has been a huge part of your life from your youngest years to now, but that you do read outside of that genre, and that's one thing that sometimes it's hard to shift our young readers. They'll get locked into a particular genre, and with lots of encouragement, suggestions, recommendations, helping them to build a really diverse reading life. Some find it difficult to shift. Would you have any advice for those young readers who are kind of not necessarily stuck in a genre, but have really built a relationship with that genre or a particular author? What recommendations would you give for them to perhaps read outside of that?
I think if they're stuck in a particular genre, when I go to school visits, a lot of students are loving fantasy. So they ask me for different recommendations. But if they're reading fantasy, often it's thriller as an action. So I will say, well, if you like that faster pace, maybe a contemporary, and I'll list some names. Rebecca James writes some great really fast-paced thrillers. I often recommend her work. If you like that beautiful flowing prose, Nicole Hayes writes some absolutely beautiful work. And her latest book, A Shadow's Breath, certainly has that punch as well. And when I've recommended her work, people have come back and said, I love that. Have you got more recommendations? So I think just to keep an open mind, and that's what I found when I had to read different books. They might not have been something that I picked up, but once I did, I loved them. And it just showed me that I don't only love thrillers, I do love all sorts of books. And I found Carl Hiaasen like that. He wrote a book called Sick Puppy, and I was really exhausted because I'd been working night shifts, and I'd gone in and I thought, I just want something that looks fun because I'd had a very heavy week, and I got this book and I just loved it. And so from then on, Comedy action was a genre that I've fallen in love with. I can't write comedy, but I love reading it, and I love watching movies that are comedy action as well.
So it seems to me you know, depending on your mood, perhaps your genre that you choose to read will reflect how you're feeling at that time.
Absolutely. And you can read to uplift yourself. You can read to slow yourself down. You can read to have that thrilling, you know, edge of your seat type experience. So I certainly read to, and I've got a few books on the go at the moment that I read in different times, depending how I'm feeling.
Great. And so what would you say gets in the way of your reading life?
Lots of other duties that you can't do. But the truth is, if I've got domestic duties, I can put an audiobook on.
Great.
When I'm driving, which I do a huge amount of driving each week, I can put an audiobook on. So it just keeps you going with that. My work, funny enough, I'm writing books, but that stops me reading, because while I'm in that really busy, intense creative stage, I find it really hard to read because that voice interferes with my voice. So yeah, I guess my work. When I'm speaking and doing publicity events, I find it hard to settle into a book. I think your mind races, so it's hard to bring that down and to stop thinking about what you could have said better, what worked in the classroom, or what you might try next time.
What advice would you then give to young readers who find themselves, even though perhaps not having the same sort of adult responsibilities, but, you know, as children have a variety of different distractions and competing voices in their head when they're reading, what advice would you give to young readers to kind of help them to get into that reading zone?
It's really hard for students who they have other assignments, and I remember being a student thinking it was very hard, and I was a huge reader, and I found it hard when you have to do an assignment for another subject, but you're wanting to actually read something else. I guess use it as your entertainment time. So instead of being on screens or watching something else, if it's what you love to do, protect that time and pick that book up. And because it is a beautiful thing to do, when you've got time to read, to make yourself a nice cup of tea or whatever, and a nice space, a comfortable space to be. And cherish that. If you love doing that, cherish that and make it happen. We do get caught up in social media, and I can be on there for 2 hours when I think, I could have actually been halfway through that novel now.
Absolutely.
And it would have been a different experience, and, you know, it winds you down. So
yeah, I like your advice of finding that special space and making time for that is a sort of really cherished moment. Would you say there's a spot that, you know, works for you? Do you have a space where you know that's my zone where I go and read, or can it just happen anywhere for you?
Well, it used to be on the train when I was in the cities. I'd love reading on trains. At the farm, it depends on what the weather is. We have such extreme weathers there. I love reading in bed, not necessarily before I go to sleep, but, you know, if you've got Sunday afternoon to make yourself warm and comfortable and hopping into bed. We've got a sunny spot where the couch is, and I love being there to read. So there's no particular spot. I love going to cafes, like if I went out by myself for lunch or morning tea, to take a book and read in the cafe. So I think if you make it a part of your life and that you carry that book around in your bag, you will always find places and time.
Absolutely. And that's something, and the reason I ask that question is that students love to share all of the places they find themselves reading and the most unusual places they'll read, and sometimes, you know, it could be the shower with one arm sort of sticking out with the book, or we had a fire drill at school. It's probably my favourite story to tell, and the class collectively picked up their books and read on their way out. And
oh, isn't that great?
It is, and it, I think, reflects the work that we're doing around really building that reading culture and the students having a really strong reading identity. So the question, is really building up that picture of how accessible we can make reading when we think that we don't have time, or that we have these competing demands, but having a book in your bag or ready to go at any moment is great advice. So thank you for your time here in Adelaide, and all the best with the event tonight.
Thank you.
Tracey's tip.
Many of you listening would know books written by John Cieska, books such as The Stinky Cheese Man, The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, Maths Curse, and many more. He warns of a phenomenon called the reader's death spiral, and in his words, it goes like this. It's where kids aren't reading, and then they are worse at reading because they aren't reading. And then they read less because it's hard, and they get worse, and then they see themselves as non-readers, and it's such a shame. I've been thinking about how audiobooks are a feature of Fleur's reading life and how they are a time saver for her in her busy schedule. However, when Fleur reflected on the kinds of reading she did at school and how at times it was at odds with the kinds of reading she did for pleasure, it reminded me of some conversations I've recently had with some of my old students who are now in middle school who are noticing the same thing. So I've been thinking about how audiobooks might also be helpful for them to continue to enjoy the reading life they built in primary school. I'm sure for many teachers and librarians listening, they see the reader's death spiral often. And to be honest, it's not just the students who find reading hard who are part of this downward spiral. It can affect the students whose reading program is purely academic or teacher selected. It can even be the voracious reader who chooses reading material that adults don't deem as worthy of literary merit. John Cieska says we should expand the definition of reading to more than novels. He says non-fiction, graphic novels, comic books, magazines, online, audiobooks. He says it all helps turn kids into readers. Kelly Gallagher, in his book Reader Side, encourages us to provide lots of high-interest reading material for students, as he says this is the first line of defence against students falling into the reader's death spiral. And it's to the point of audiobooks I'd like to turn my attention. Stephanie Harvey and Annie Ward, in their book From Striving to Thriving, How to Grow Confident, Capable Readers, tell us that digital listening allows kids to gain information in ways unimaginable only a decade ago. Audiobooks are almost a daily conversation that I have with teachers, as this kind of reading doesn't look like the traditional model of reading that many teachers grew up with. There are those who question the value of audiobooks, suggesting that listening to a book rather than reading it yourself is cheating. Many teachers wonder how we support readers in this space and what assessment could look like. It really challenges our notion of what it means to read and be a reader. Daniel Willingham, a psychologist from the University of Virginia, reminds us that listening to an audiobook might be considered cheating if the act of decoding were the point. However, the point is getting to and enjoying the destination, not how you travelled there. So, if we are to read with our ears, as Terry Lasesny refers to audiobooks, how could this look in the classroom? Antero Garcia, a featured educator in Donnell & Miller and Colby Sharp's book Game Changer, reminds us that the use of audiobooks requires trust between teachers and students. If we're serious about getting kids reading, we need to think more divergently about how this does look in the classroom. We may have a myriad of students who may be longing to become readers if we encourage them to plug into text in different ways. Garcia warns that we must consider what opportunities are denied and what interests are diffused when we exclude certain kinds of media. Providing children with sticky notes to jot their thoughts while listening is a great strategy for students to hold on to their thinking for later discussion. We can also provide opportunities for students to share headphones so that they can listen to stories simultaneously and provide time for them to stop and chat about their thinking along the way. So I guess my tip today is multifaceted. I guess I'm thinking about audiobooks being a bit of a panacea for a range of reading dilemmas. Fleur recognises time as an issue in her reading life, and audiobooks are one way that she can protect and cherish her own reading time. For the diverse range of readers we work with, the avid, the time poor, and those who struggle with the act of decoding, perhaps audiobooks could be a format that we help to build into their reading lives. If you haven't already, consider audiobooks as one way to help our young readers avoid the reading death spiral. To keep up to date with all of our latest episodes, make sure you subscribe to your preferred platform on the AuscastNetwork.com. And of course, follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Writers Read by LiTracey. On the next Writers Read podcast, we hear from Melbourne-based author Emily Gale. She's going to read aloud from her latest young adult fiction book, I Am Out with Lanterns.
Writers Read by LiTracey. Getting that book in children's hands. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Writers Read by LiTracey, a Dave and the Beanstalk production.